Alrighty folks, it's time to talk about these two yo-yos. Now first, I don't know if this thing is called the Yacare or Yacare, but let's just get straight into some of the more visual details about this. I'll put the details up on the screen here, but if we're going to look at finger spinning, the first thing we should look at is the cup here. Now, as you can see, it's kind of split into three different sections for the cup design here. You can see it's a very shallow little hole here that you actually get your finger into, but I actually find that to be perfectly fine as far as spinning the yo-yo on my finger goes. These other little gaps here, they do help guide your finger into the hole very well. It's not going to get locked in quite as fast as other finger spin yo-yos, but once you do get your finger in there, it is actually a very comfortable spin. Now, as for the pivot, first of all, this is one of the smoothest blasted yo-yos I've ever felt. But as far as the finger spinning goes on this, I would say this is easily one of the best finger spinning yo-yos I've ever used. I've used kind of what this was based on, the Sherpa, and the finger spinning on that is considerably more difficult, but I would actually say the Sherpa is even better for finger spinning once you get your finger on there. It just feels a lot more balanced. I feel like it goes for a much longer spin time. But the Pivot is easily the most accessible and easiest to finger spin that I've used. I've used other yo-yos like the Skyva, obviously, Sherpa, the Yacare now, the Move, and to some extent the Compass, but easily the Pivot beats out all the others. So I suppose if you just wanted to select, if we wanted to end the video right now and say which one is easier for finger spinning on, I would just go on with the Pivot. But I do kind of want to talk about the overall quality of the yo-yo. Both of these yo-yos, they kind of excel at different things. The Pivot is a much more basic throw, like it'll be able to handle most things like most yo-yos could for its price point, but of course they wanted to, they being Yo-Yo Factory, wanted to highlight its main capability, which is this little divot for landing your finger into for the finger spins. So as an all-rounder, you know, it'll be able to handle whatever you throw at it. It's perfectly fine for that. As far as its weight goes, it's alright. It's hollow, so it feels a little weird, but it's not that strange, honestly. I've used the Sherpa, like I've said before, and the Sherpa, again, it's hollow, but like it doesn't feel that weird. As far as the Yacare goes, the Yacare does feel a little more speedy on the rope. Its shape is also a little more, I find when it comes to the actual bind, for when you're throwing the string to, you know, get it off your finger, I find that the bind is a little easier on the Yacare than the Pivot. So, you know, if I'm trying to, you know, impress somebody and try to do a little bit of a bind off of the finger spin, I've had considerable more success with the Yacare than the Pivot, and I suppose that could be because of the response pads that they use. I don't really have too many issues with the response pads on either of these yo-yos as far as just normal play goes. It's pretty hard to note any differences, but I suppose the Yacare is ever so slightly more grippy for those horizontal binds. So as far as the Yacare goes, it's a little speedier than the Pivot. It's got a little better grippiness for its binds. So if you wanted a yo-yo that was just overall like a well-rounded yo-yo as far as being able to handle not only just finger spins but also, you know, horizontal play as well as regular play at a very speedy pace, then the Yacare does beat out the Pivot. But honestly, it's kind of hard to choose between which is the better yo-yo in this scenario, just due to the fact that if we're looking purely at just how good it spins on your finger, the Pivot wins. But as far as being a well-rounded yo-yo and also having better horizontal binds, I'd have to say the Yacare. So it's a bit of a toss-up as far as which yo-yo is better. But as far as just sheer finger spins, looking at that alone, I would say the Pivot is a better yo-yo for it, just because it does have the special dimple that locks you right in. There's no, you know, you put so little effort into it. Like, the yo-yo does almost all the work for you. And a lot of people could see that as a good thing. Some might see it as bad. But as far as being a learner's yo-yo, I find getting finger spins on this even easier than a Skyva, and they certainly last longer than a Skyva. But I do want to say the yo-yo that I prefer would be the Yacare here, just because, I don't know, I kind of love the blasting on it, and the shape is, I find it has longer spins than the Pivot, and as far as like finger spinning at this point, like, when I'm finger spinning on something like a compass, you know, that's flat. I'm at this point pretty decent as far as getting it onto my finger and keeping it there. So the thing that I need more practice with is those horizontal binds, and the Yacare does do that for me. So overall, the better yo-yo for spinning it on your finger would be the Pivot. The better overall yo-yo, in my opinion, is the Yacare. Now, I hate to disappoint, but I don't have a tripod with me right now, so any demonstrations I would do would come across looking pretty awkward and kind of poor angles, so I hope that in future reviews I can demonstrate, you know, how these stack up. But I also hope to review a couple other yo-yos that have finger spin capabilities in the future. I have the aforementioned Sherpa yo-yo here, the C3 yo-yo design move, a Skyva, and a compass. It's a fool's gold compass, so it might not be able to be that identifiable purely based off of the lack of markings. But, you know, I do also have the Yo-Yo Empire Tsunami on its way here. And so I'm very excited to kind of show off how these all stack up against each other. I don't know if I'm going to do many more, you know, yo-yo versus yo-yo kind of comparisons, but I just thought it would be fun to do a bit of a comparison between these because they are somewhat contemporary finger spinning yo-yos and were both designed for that purpose. So I hope you enjoyed, and hope to see you again soon. Peace.